Hi, if you're here from the previous event, please go ahead and take your conversations outside. And if you're here for this event, please come on in. We're going to get started in just a minute. Okay, so if everybody could come on in and take a seat. There are plenty of seats towards the front of the room. You don't have to stand at the back. Hi, my name is Jessie Arnell. I'm with Series and the We Are Still In team. We're going to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Fernandez, Director of Governance and Global Partnerships from C40, to get us started for this event.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we've got a really exciting event today. I hope everyone can hear me all right. So welcome to the event entitled Together for Higher Ambition, How Domestic Alliances of Subnational Actors Are Championing Decarbonization Around the World. So this event is focused on the Alliances for Climate Action, an initiative that C40 has been part of for a couple years now since it was founded. Today we're going to talk all about partnerships and the kind of collaboration needed to get to a 1.5 degree world. Is that here? So I want to first thank the Stanley Center for Peace and Security and the U.S. Climate Action Center and WWF for hosting this event on behalf of global and national partners of the Alliances for Climate Action. So we've got packed agenda, so let's get started. Our first speaker today is Gonzalo Muñoz Abogavir, Chile's high-level champion for climate action. Gonzalo.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We are not only facing critical times, we're facing times where radical collaboration is extremely needed, more than ever. And in the past, we have solved big problems of humankind. We have solved many problems for society and the environment. But I just want to highlight how much of being here in Madrid, how much of the partnership and the generosity that Spain and Madrid opened for Chile, that is allowing us to be here, is a way to express how much people, countries, regions can do when they join for a common cause. So first I want to thank, as I've been doing the whole week, and the Chilean presidency team have been doing the whole week, thank you Spain, thank you Madrid, not only for allowing us to be here, but also for the expression of hope that is reflected in the aspect that we're here. And speaking about collaboration, speaking about common goals, this is a COP of action. This is the first COP entering not only a year of implementation, it's a year when we have to increase ambition. And for us, it's absolutely clear that the aspect that we have to highlight around ambition is following science. We have been very vocal on saying that we have no time to discuss the role of science. We have no time to discuss how relevant it is for all of us to follow what science is telling us to do through the 1.5 IPCC report and many other reports that the IPCC has been releasing in the last 12 to 18 months. And in that sense, it seems to be quite clear that we have to follow one concrete goal. That concrete goal in a number is 1.5 degrees. In an action is a net zero and resilient world by 2050. Hopefully before that, but at least all of us should be absolutely committed to that net zero and resilient world by 2050. We need, of course, parties to do so, and we already have parties that are committing. We need sub-regions to do so. We need cities to do so. We need investors and business leaders to do so. That's the main concept that is around the Climate Ambition Alliance that we launched in the September 23rd during the General Secretary Summit. That alliance is one very concrete element that we are working towards increase the number of members. In my role as a high-level champion, it's my duty to continue bringing non-state actors to the list. Subnational regions, cities, investors, businesses, and we will work from now to Glasgow to increase that list, hopefully dramatically, as an element of hope for the cities in the streets that are telling us to follow science. When you see that list, you will see the expression of what brought us here. It's a perfect expression of integration of national governments, of subnational regions, of cities, of organization of different categories, including businesses and investors. And then it goes to even schools and citizens that are all committed towards the same goal. So you have to be very clear on my commitment, personal commitment, and the thing that I'm going to be doing during next year is increasing what this alliance is doing, what this group is promoting. We need to show the world that there are certain regions in the world where everybody is understanding that we are in a crisis, that we have enough evidence, that science has spoken, and that we have a common goal in order to work with. Yesterday, I was with the mayor of Madrid. I was with the mayor of Las Rosas. I was indeed with the biggest number of Latin American mayors that have never attended a COP. And our conversation was they play an extremely relevant role while connecting to civil society and understanding where they are in their space. Are they connected to a party that is already committed? What happens with the society? What happens with the organization? What happens with the business sector? Are they already committed? If they are, we have to show that to the world. We have to show that to the citizen, because that's the element of hope that they require. If they are not, then it's up to all of us to start pushing for the ones that are missing to commit. So the idea, the type of leadership that we need is absolutely expressed in this room and in this session, because we have to show the citizens of the world that there are already certain ecosystems where everybody is understanding that we are running out of time and there is already a very specific task to be followed. So my commitment is to work with you to make this group as an element, tool for that alliance to grow, and hopefully we can work together in the next 12 months and so on. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Gonzalo. And thank you so much for that really emphatic, powerful endorsement of Alliances for Climate Action, which we all strongly believe in, and it's great to get that sort of recognition. Okay, so next I'm going to introduce Mariana Panuncio Feldman, Senior Director of International Climate Cooperation at WWF US, who's going to show us a little video and give an overview of Alliances for Climate Action around the world. Mariana?
Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us here today. So it's a pleasure to be having this conversation with you. What we're going to do is just give you a sense of a vision of what Alliances for Climate Action is, first through the video that is about to start, and then through a small introduction to the initiative. Okay, it was just starting. Okay, so in the meantime, let me tell you. So of course, we test things 5 times, and we test them again right before starting. And when it needs to happen, it doesn't start. So in the meantime, we wanted to tell you a bit of what the run of the agenda is going to be today. We're going to be doing a quick introduction to Alliances for Climate Action, and then you're going to hear from the representatives themselves. So with that, we're ready to go. Thank you. These are leaders. These are leaders from around the world that are taking this to heart and doing their part. Don't worry. We're all doing our best, and it will come. We just need to breathe. I will do what a former colleague did when things got strange. Breathe, take 3 breaths, and here we go. Okay, here we go. Thank you for bearing with us. Okay, so now quick introduction to Alliances for Climate Action. So we all know what science is telling us. We are all here because of that. And we also know what the challenges are, that climate impact is not an issue of the future. It is an issue of the present and the future. It is already affecting us. And we also know what we need to do. 2020 starts in what? 3 weeks? And 2020 is the year when we need to peak global emissions. And then after that, we need to do something extraordinary. Together, as a global community, we need to cut global emissions in half in the next 10 years, and we need to reach net zero by 2050. The big question is, how are we going to get there? So we know that national governments have a critical role to play. They set the rules of the game at the national level. They set the long-term direction for development of the country. But we know that they cannot do it alone. We know that actors in the real economy, cities, states and regions, businesses, investors, universities, civil society, faith institutions, cultural institutions, so many actors around the world in their economies have a role to play, because each of them has a carbon footprint that they can address and also have the ability to mobilize society for a common good. Together, we can be stronger. And we know that subnational and non-state actors are not waiting to act. Right now, based on the individual commitments of subnational and non-state actors, as well as international initiatives that are working with them, we know that if we combine the work, the commitments, the current commitments of national governments and the work of subnational and non-state actors reflected in this initiative, and that it gets fully delivered, we could be on a path to 2 degrees. But we know that there's so much more that we can unleash. This current level of already the engagement that we have is enormous, and we know that we can make it stronger. But what are we finding? We have a growing momentum of subnational and non-state actors taking part. But when you actually look what is happening actually in the almost 200 countries around the world, you actually look within a country what is happening, we know that we have some challenges. The first one is that while we have domestic champions in each country for climate action, we don't have enough of them. We need more if we're going to create a critical mass at the national level. The second piece is that we know that oftentimes citizens of their own countries don't know the amazing things that these cities, states, and regions and businesses are already doing. We hear them here at the COP, and people back at home don't know about it. And the third one is that we often see that constituencies tend to work with each other, cities with cities, businesses with businesses, civil society with other organizations. We are not yet seeing that connective tissue that can build a unified voice. So Alliances for Climate Action is at a time when we are shifting to full implementation of the Paris Agreement, and we know that the Paris Agreement will be delivered based on national circumstances from the ground up. Alliances for Climate Action is helping support powerful, diverse coalitions of subnational and non-state actors that want to drive climate action in their countries and work with their national governments to reach a vision of decarbonization aligned with 1.5. So basically what these nascent alliances are doing is they're elevating climate champions that exist and encouraging others to join and work together in collaboration. These alliances include actors that are ready to stand up shoulder to shoulder with each other to tell their countrymen and countrywomen why decarbonization is good for their own country and why it will provide benefits to our citizens in their own words. And the third thing is they want to have a constructive engagement whenever possible with national governments, because together we can create the ambition loop of action that we urgently seek. this is a growing family. Alliances for Climate Action was launched as a global network 1 year ago, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. As I mentioned, all of these subnational and non-state actor signatories that make the outer ring are the force and the strength of these alliances for climate action in their countries. And they're supported by amazing national organizations that are the second ring, and global organizations that are really ready to work with all of these players at the national level so that they can achieve their national vision of development that is zero carbon. So with that, this is what Alliances for Climate Action is, but I think the most important thing is for you to hear directly from the actors themselves that are leading by example. So with that, we'll go to the panel. Thank you.
Okay, for our next panel, we're going to have one of the speakers will be speaking in Spanish. So if you need a apologies. He'll be speaking in English, but if you would like Spanish translation, all you need to do is hold up your badge, and someone from WWF will bring you a headset. No? Okay. I think we're okay. The other thing is there's a sign-in sheet that's going around. If you could add your name to that, that would be great. Okay, so the next panel is going to be where we hear about the different alliances set up in Argentina, Japan, Mexico, US, South Africa, and Vietnam. The session's entitled Leveraging Domestic Opportunities for Higher Ambition, the Subnational Coalition's Perspective. So let me introduce now Jenny Gleed, the Senior Policy Manager from CDP, who will be moderating this session. Jenny.
I'd like to welcome the panelists to join me on the stage. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic set of panelists here today. From the Alianza para la Acción Climática de México, we have the Governor Enrique Alfaro Ramirez, the Governor of the State of Jalisco, and Head of the Commission of Environment and Climate Change to the National Conference of Governors in Mexico. Also from the Alianza para la Acción Climática Argentina, we have Christian Feldkamp, who's CEO of CREA, a national network of agricultural producers in Argentina. From the Japan Climate Initiative, we have Toshiko Chiba, Deputy Director for Carbon Policy Planning Section of the Climate Change and Energy Division, Bureau of Environment, Tokyo Metropolitan Government. From We Are Still In, we have Nate Holtman, Associate Professor of the School of Public Policy and Director for the Center for Global Sustainability of the University of Maryland. From the Alliances for Climate Action South Africa, we have Takalani Nedshi Tenje, Executive Director of Vodacom. And then finally, last but not least, from the Vietnam Coalition for Climate Action, we have Dr. Tuan, Head of the Department of Environmental Management and Climate Issues. So a fantastic panel. So I'll just give it just a minute of framing. We have a packed agenda. So I'd just like to invite the panelists to make sure that they just take a look at Manjot. She'll be keeping you all to time. So the NDCs were first submitted by countries 5 years ago. Now a lot has happened since then. We've seen renewable energy prices dropping. We've seen new policies and programs being put in place all around the world. But at the same time, we've seen the climate crisis worsening. So, here today, we're going to hear a little bit about domestic ambition to really realize these global goals. So first of all, I would like to invite Governor Martinez, please. You have the floor first.
Good morning, all. Mexico is a country rich in culture, gastronomy, natural resources, and diversity. It's the 15th largest economy of the world, a leading developing country in Latin America with multiple trade deals and the second receiver of foreign direct investment in the region. However, as it happens with other countries, all the wealth production and growth has been accompanied by negative environmental impact. Mexico is also number 1 in greenhouse gas emission in Latin America and number 10 worldwide. The commitment made by the Mexican national government during the COP21 in 2015 has been since then, as in most of the world, not enough. The report made by the Climate Action Tracker Organization in 2018 deems Mexico performance as insufficient. In the report regarding the fulfillment of sustainable development goals in the same year, we failed 8 of the 17 indicators. And in climate transparency in 2019, Mexico is estimated to advance in a warming route of 2 and 3 degrees Celsius. As if these were not enough, this year, in the country we have been witness to the revival of the oil industry and the gamble for the construction of new oil refineries, the cancellation of renewable source auctions, and the undervalue of clean energy certificates. This cannot go on. The global call is clear. We are failing our children, and they are rubbing it in our faces. The lack of connection between the narratives and the facts in national governments have, in my perspective, a solution: changing the focus towards the local scene. This is why since 2016, as mayor of Guadalajara, alongside the mayor of Mexico City, we added to the C40, the network of megacities committed to climate change. Likewise, 2 years ago, the WWF started with Guadalajara metropolitan area as the first city of Mexico, the local alliance for climate action. Now Monterrey, the third largest city in Mexico, is part of this network too. Taking this into consideration, I'm very proud to announce that last November 27, the subnational governments in Mexico have created the Alliance of Mexican Governors for Climate, which I have the honor to represent today. All the states of Mexico, all the parties, we are all in. With this alliance, we've decided to commit to climate action to reach the goals posed by the Paris Agreement. Subnational governments can't stand by and wait for countries to take the lead and show us the way. Nor the timeline or the enormity of the problem allow us to. It is absolutely necessary to be proactive. We are very clear in the knowledge that no change can be accomplished if we don't start locally, close to the community and their need, using our knowledge on the territory and its vocation. Anyway, the support of the President of Mexico will be strategic. I'm sure that he will be an ally of this agreement. Through the Alliance of Mexican Governors for Climate, we have designed 10 transversal high-impact strategies from a subnational level and complementary to the Federation. Climate action plans or programs with adaptation, mitigation, and resilience measures that recognize the transversality of the climate agenda between institutions and sector, as well as intergovernmental collaborations. The climate action plans or programs based on vulnerability analysis and incorporate to their actions the adaptation based on ecosystems visions. Third, fight against deforestation and the degradation of our forests and jungles, effectively integrating the farming sector. Create tools that facilitate the impulse made by the energy transition towards clean sources and efficient use of energy. Development of public transportation and sustainable mobility projects. Emission reduction through integral waste management under policies that facilitate circular economy. Policies and tools that favor quality of air management. Territorial planning tools built in an integral manner to facilitate the reduction of land use changes and the degradation of ecosystems, managing a commitment made by the private sector to implement the climate agenda, and facing in the industrial sector as a generator of emissions and the farmer sector as an enabler of land use changes. And finally, structuring of municipal governments through guidance and consultancy, as well as prompting collaborative mechanisms between municipalities and cities. In the face of emergency and in the face of lack of action from some national governments, more questions than answers come to mind. How can we force the machine to accelerate the process against climate change? How can we as subnational governments take a step forward? What are the codes to unblock the agenda? The challenges are huge, and we will work in constructing financial mechanisms to implement the commitments established in the alliance. We can also attend to the exchange of experience and good practice. We must advance in our commitments and go even further to define our most ambitious goals in amount and in deadlines. It is not enough to list the objectives. Each goal we set must be accompanied with plans and specific work agendas to achieve them. Within the Alliance of Mexican Governors for Climate, we find ourselves in this moment of definition and planning. Time is not on our side. Achieving to align an environmental policy requires not only political will, but also sensibility to understand what we have lost and we will continue to lose if we don't take action. We need to take on the responsibility individually and act towards the common good. And once we've understood this, take time as an ally and invest in long-term strategies without political timelines that erode hope. Subnational and local governments in Mexico are taking on the responsibility. The results of this commitment will begin to be seen in Glasgow. We will not fail. Thank you very much.
That's incredible, and I can't wait to hear the results in Glasgow. So as we look at the revision of NDCs, and with such an incredible framing for this panel, I would really like to move to our other panel members and think about what are the domestic opportunities that exist within your region, what's most needed, and how will these benefit people in your country. So with that in mind, let's get started. And I'm going to go to Vietnam first. So welcome, Dr. Tuan. Renewable energy adoption is growing rapidly in Vietnam. How has the landscape changed since Vietnam first submitted their NDC?
Okay. Thank you, Jenny, for your nice introduction and for your question. As you may know, VCCA, Vietnam Coalition for Climate Action, has just been founded just 3 months ago. But we are now having up to more than 40 members and partners. It's a very quick development of the coalition. Vietnam is a developing country with an emerging economy in Southeast Asia. And we have a tropical monsoon climate, so we have a very tremendous untapped potential of renewable energy. So since Vietnam first submitted its nationally determined contribution, we have witnessed extremely rapid development of renewable energy as a whole, and the solar energy, the solar power deployment throughout the country in particular. For the past 2 years, from 2018 to 2019, we can see rapid development of the solar energy, especially the solar energy plants all over the country. We have increased up to more than 50 times in solar energy development. I mean the total capacity from just only 500 megawatt up to 4,400 megawatt just within 13 months. An amazing development. And in addition, we also developed the rooftop solar PV. We are now have more than 5,000 private from private sector. I mean building from private sector, including household, has been installed with the rooftop solar power, and hopefully this number continue growing in the near future. to ensure our energy security and our sustainability. Thank you.
So great to hear about the rapid developments that are going on in Vietnam. That's incredible. So moving on to Argentina, emissions from the land sector are key. So welcome, Mr. Feldkamp. Can you tell us what was originally reflected in Argentina's NDC, and where do you see the greatest need and opportunity to reduce emissions from the agriculture sector?
Okay. Oh, yep. Okay. Hello. Thank you very much for the invitation and the possibility to share some ideas. First, to say it works. Yeah. Okay. A few words about land sector and farming sector in Argentina. As you might know, farming sector in Argentina is one of the main economical sectors. We are a country of farmers, and at the same time, our emissions, 39% of our emissions are coming from the land use sector, agriculture and land use change. And this gives us a huge opportunity. Besides, our main source of dollars and exports is the agricultural sector, and our main labor generator is also this sector. We have a huge opportunity to reduce the emissions. First of all, let me tell you that the NDCs regarding the agricultural sector are only conditional, and the planning sector are only conditional, and it's about 30% of the baseline of 2014. And they are mainly focused on increasing the forest area. We can increase up to 2 million hectares of forestation. Also, in the sector plan of the NDCs are the increase of the proportion of cereals against oilseeds. It's a very important aspect of this reduction plan. And also the increase in the use of biomass for the production of energy. But when we see this from the alliance, from our alliance of climate action in Argentina, we see these commitments quite shy so far. And we believe that livestock, which is a main emitter in Argentina, it's a huge chance to increase the commitments to reduce emissions, and also the change of practices to sequester carbon in our soils. During the last 100 years, our soils have been depleted in some way of carbon, and we have a good opportunity and a great opportunity to sequester a lot of carbon in this. But I think this kind of shyness in the commitments is because we lack a lot of information. And we are working hard in our alliances together with the government and other institutions in order to generate all this information that we need to raise the ambition. Stop.
Thank you, Mr. Feldkamp. Information is so hugely important to assist with opportunities, so thank you. Welcome, Dr. Holtman. In the United States, there's been important progress in the electricity sector, but where do we need to go next in that sector, and what other economic sectors do you see the most opportunities to speed up the decarbonization of the US?
So thanks for the question, and I also want to thank Governor Martinez for your inspiring work and comments. It's the kind of work that I think we're all working. Yes. I'll even pull the microphone closer to me. So the question was about what more can be done in the U.S. The question mentioned that power sector is a big sector of opportunity and also action, and I want to underscore a little bit more on that front, and then talk very briefly about a few other things that are going on and happening at an accelerating rate and a deepening rate in what we're seeing across the U.S. So huge opportunities exist in the U.S. power sector for further decarbonization, and they come in many, many forms. In our federal system in the United States, a number of policy authorities are delegated to subnational, like state and city entities, counties, and others. And what we've seen in the past couple of years is actually a remarkable trajectory, even over the past like 2 or 3 years, of states, cities, businesses, and others stepping up to say, we are actually going to accelerate what we're doing, not only in power, but these other areas. Let me give you one example. A few years ago, the idea of 100% clean electricity was something that was thought to be kind of unrealistic or kind of outside the kind of realm of what states or cities would actually try to do. In mid-2018, there was one state, which was Hawaii, that had committed to 100% clean electricity. Today, that number of states has expanded tremendously to 14 and represents either enacted or proposed 100% clean electricity standards now cover over a quarter of U.S. electricity demand. That is in 2 years, less than 2 years. And that is the kind of leadership that we heard from Governor Martinez at the state level. But there's also cities stepping up. We now have 138 cities taking 100% clean electricity commitments compared to 58 in 2017. So again, a rapid deepening of commitment and broadening of support. 62 companies representing $8 trillion of market capitalization, including Apple, Johnson & Johnson, Bank of America, Walmart, Starbucks, and other leaders have stepped up to say they are going 100% clean electricity. So that is one of many possibilities, but one that we've seen a tremendous amount of heartening action on. Very briefly, a few others I'm going to tick through more quickly. Other opportunities in the U.S. exist at these kind of subnational or state city levels for energy efficiency goals for buildings. I'm good. For accelerated retirement of coal and other fossil-fired fossil-fired electricity plants, fugitive emissions from oil and gas, whether regulatory or voluntary with industry, transport, zero emission vehicle mandates and EV procurement policies, HFC regulations, and a suite of measures that are consistent with what the U.S. Climate Alliance has called the Natural and Working Lands Initiative, which includes various kinds of initiatives to support enhanced carbon sequestration and ecosystem optimization in forests, farmland, ranch land, grasslands, wetlands, and others.
Real wealth of opportunity there, Nate. So just fantastic to hear about those opportunities to increase ambition that exist from land use to all those sectors and renewable energy. Really, really incredible. But next we're going to move on to what we see as current and subnational and non-state actors' leadership. So despite the fact that we're hearing from very different realities, the potential to do more exists. So what's already happening? What are domestic actors doing? So first of all, I'd like to go to Japan and welcome to Ms. Chiba. If you could tell us about climate action in Japan. What's happening? What's your city, Tokyo, doing? What are other non-state actors doing to address climate change?
Okay, thank you very much for warm introduction. It's a great pleasure to participate in such a great conference. Tokyo, as one of the JCI members, I'd like to share with you Tokyo's challenges towards becoming a decarbonized city. As a global megalopolis, last May, our governor of Tokyo, Ms. Yuriko Koike, declared that Tokyo will seek to achieve the 1.5 degree goal and realize a net zero emission Tokyo that contributes to the world's net zero carbon emissions by around 2050. We believe that transforming Tokyo into a decarbonized society is a vital key for both protecting the lives and property of the citizens in Tokyo and attracting business and investment. And we, Tokyo, is always at the side of young people. This is a future we want. The Tokyo's energy consumption peaked by 2000. Our greenhouse gas emissions peaked in around 2013. This is a result of our efforts towards reducing the energy consumption, despite we, a local government in Japan, having no authority on nationwide energy policies. Okay, in Tokyo, buildings account for more than 70% of energy-related CO2 emissions, and power consumption accounts for more than half of them. We have been investing our energy passionately into this area, and we continue to strengthen policy planning in this area. More specifically, we aim to increase the number of net zero emission buildings for new and existing builds in Tokyo, which are designed to undertake further energy efficiency and the move to renewable energy usage of remaining energy sources. Regarding our green building program for new building under Tokyo Ordinance, we will implement the net zero energy building evaluation program for the purpose of energy efficient assessment of equipment and the system from 2020. And also regarding existing buildings, we have implemented the Tokyo Cap and Trade program, the world's first city-based mandatory CO2 emission reduction program for large facilities. This was launched in 2010 by Tokyo Ordinance to great success. In 2017, covered facilities achieved 27% reduction levels from base year emissions. And from 2020, Tokyo will strengthen the reduction obligation level and shift our focus to promoting low carbon power purchasing. The Tokyo recognized that these are the first step aiming to transform Tokyo into becoming a decarbonized society for real. Tokyo will announce our new climate strategy by the end of this month. We are ready to take a bold step forward in all fields. Thank you.
I think we're all looking forward to seeing that climate strategy. That's amazing. So now over to South Africa. Welcome, Ms. Netshi Tenje. South Africa has a significant reliance on coal, but companies like the one you lead, VodaCom, are taking action. So what are you doing on renewable energy to tackle climate change?
Thank you very much for inviting us. Am I audible? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you very much for inviting us. VodaCom is a subsidiary of Vodafone. And as you mentioned, South Africa is still highly dependent on coal. However, even though South Africa is a slow adopter of renewables, there is a general consensus amongst all the stakeholders, government, civil society, and business, that climate change should not just be about threats and challenges, it is also about opportunities. And the opportunity that we see ourselves as a corporate that is in the technology space is to recognize that we do not exist in a vacuum. Our operations are intrinsically linked to the circumstances of the countries in which we operate. So South Africa, for instance, realizing that we are still highly dependent on coal, has come up with an integrated resource plan, which is the country's blueprint, which is intended to migrate the country from coal into renewables. But it is still a blueprint. And what does that mean for us as a corporate? Because we operate in a fast-paced environment, it is important that we should always benchmark ourselves against the best. And this means that we have to ensure that we adopt renewables and invest on that. So what we're doing as a company is to ensure that we adopt the Sustainable Development Goals as our reporting framework, which we did 2 years ago. And as part of that, partnership is very key, because we realize that no player alone can be able to address the challenges of climate change alone. Vodacom has now turned 25 years this year, And we are now repositioning ourselves as a purpose-led organization, which means that we recognize that we can make profits whilst at the same time we are doing good. The two are not mutually exclusive. What does this mean in practice? It means that we are redefining our purpose to be a company that connects for a better future. And there are three pillars, one of which touches on planet. The first one is for us to adopt and to create digital societies and embrace the fourth industrial revolution. And as we do so, we have to be mindful that we don't leave anybody behind. But most importantly, on planet, as our operations are growing exponentially, it means that our energy consumption, it means that our water consumption, and our waste generation is going to be growing exponentially. And therefore, it is important that we should adopt environmentally friendly practices and technologies in order to mitigate the negative impact of climate change. So what are we doing? I'll just share a few things before I stop. Charity begins at home. We have now started consolidating all our offices and bringing them at head office to ensure that we have open plan offices, because by doing that, it helps that we manage our energy efficiently. And secondly, we have started adopting solar in most of our operations. For instance, 25% of energy in our Lesotho office is coming from solar. 75% of energy in our Cape Town office is coming from solar. And of the 1,000 of base stations that we have, about 1,000 of them are now solar-based. And you won't believe it, the majority of those are in the DRC, which shows that there is a lot of potential for developing countries to leapfrog from nothing into renewables. We are also leveraging our emerging digital technologies such as the Internet of Things, and we are now deploying those technologies in our base stations and our operations. We are deploying technologies such as sensors, because when we deploy sensors, it means that we can be able to monitor how the base stations are operating remotely and cut on our indirect emissions. And we are also putting smart meterings so that we are able to measure the performance of our base station. We are also in the waste management space because we want to limit the amount of methane that we are releasing into the environment. And that means that we have to cut on the use of plastic bags in our restaurants. We have also removed plastic bags in all our stores. And also, you know, Africa is a water scarce country. South Africa has a challenge of water right now with severe drought. And therefore, we are now deploying emerging digital technologies such as smart meterings in order to ensure that we manage the water, because most of the water in the country is wasted through leakages. So there are a lot of opportunities that as partners we can look at in order to ensure that we all contribute to a better planet.
That's fantastic to hear all the things that you're doing. Mr. Falcamp, what about agricultural producers in Argentina? Are they taking action to reduce emissions, and why?
Yeah, I think we don't have time enough to, because I mentioned that we lack a lot of information on the real impact and how to avoid that. And we know that we don't have time to wait for science to see which are the drivers. So now in Argentina is kind of a big experiment is being conducted. At the same time, we are doing a lot of different management in order to see how to mitigate. Because when you think we are an open air industry, so we are highly impacted by the global, the climate change, of course. Within the context of the alliance, we have been making several analyses with quite promising results. For instance, the footprint of beef production could be cut up to 25%, and this is a huge leap and give us hope in order to raise our ambition regarding the livestock sector, which is about 16% of the emissions in Argentina. Also, the sequestration of carbon in soils, as I already mentioned, it's very promising. Adequate sequences of crops gives us, and the use of service crops gives the chance to sequester up to 1 ton of carbon in soils per year, and this compensates a lot of our practices. Recently, all the Board of Trades of commodities, agricultural commodities in Argentina released a program for neutral carbon farming practices. So in the next year, we will see kind of systems and producers being certified as carbon neutral, and this is a very good step forward. And why it is important? I think there are two main reasons. First, because most of the actions that release and that reduce emissions, we have seen that they are win-win with profits, win-win with productivity. For instance, good sequences in terms of carbon balance gives about 6% more yields and 10% when we have a drought season. So win-win situations, it's a very good opportunity. Also because we realize the climate change, because we are suffering the climate change every day. And finally, I think regarding the market possibilities, recently a free trade agreement between Mercosur and the European Union has been signed, and this, of course, brings responsibility in order to reduce our emissions. But let me skip just a few seconds from the agricultural sector. In our alliance, also a network of cities, of municipalities, it's integrating. There are more than 200 cities in this network, and they have started to measure all the emissions, to make the inventories per city, and they are planning actions to mitigate. And we are really proud that this network of municipalities of Argentina against climate change is integrating that, and they raised the ambition, 45% of reduction of emissions in 2030. So I think the next applause is for them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Nate, I'd just like to come back to you just to give a little more detail on what the companies, cities, universities like yours are doing in the US on climate action.
Well, thanks for that question, and let me try to build on what the previous panelists have said. So I'm at the University of Maryland, which is the major research university in the Washington, D.C. area. We are a public university, and our mission is to serve the vitality of our community, our state, our country, and the world. It's in that light that we are part of, we are still in. And another dimension of our participation is as co-leads for the America's Pledge Project, which is also sort of affiliated with We Are Still In, and tries to understand and track progress and look to new opportunities that can happen with this kind of driver of city, state, business, academic, university, communities of faith, and others stepping up and doing more. So America's Pledge is a research engagement and a communications coalition that is trying to link what We Are Still In is doing to better understand opportunities and communicate back and forth with the various stakeholders about what those opportunities are. We are now, as a result of some work over the last year, very happy to note that this coalition of actors in the United States is now basically globally significant. It's a massive coalition representing today nearly 70% of U.S. GDP, over about 65% of U.S. population, and over half of U.S. emissions. If it were a country, that would represent the world's second largest economy in the world, ahead of China, and behind only the United States itself as a full country. So this coalition is globally significant, and as I said before with some of the examples, the actions are broadening and deepening, and if you are interested in learning more about what they do add up to, watch over the next today and tomorrow as we're rolling out our report, and we'll tell you a lot more about that later. But I want to conclude by just saying what I see, drawing from this experience of America's Pledge and also being part of We Are Still In, I see a tremendous opportunity here as we think about our role as this community sitting here, working with the wonderful alliances that are part of Alliances for Climate Action, to think differently and creatively about how we learn from each other and what we do. And so my perspective is one of the things that's been tremendously valuable is thinking about that link between scoping new ambition, sharing information across our different coalitions and our different entities. And that's something that sort of certainly I and we are sort of in our own world going to be continuing to do in the US, but I see a tremendous opportunity for us in this room kicking off today to be doing a lot more of that kind of work together. And I think that that's a tremendous opportunity. It is really how we will define a new way of building national ambition over the next year, built on this tremendous amount of leadership from cities, states, businesses, and others. We know that it was embedded in the Paris Agreement. We know that we're all going to be part of it. But I think now is the moment to actually build that roadmap for exactly how we can link ourselves together and support the national governments as they're enhancing their NDCs over the next 12 months. Thank you.
Absolutely. We've heard so many opportunities, so many things that you're all doing, but we still need to work on that political will. How do you think? I'm going to ask a few of the panelists just to give a very brief sort of final response to how we think the Alliances for Climate Action can really respond to this challenge of unlocking this political will. So first I'd like to go to Vietnam. Dr. Tuan, what's the main challenges you see it in Vietnam, and how can the ACA really contribute to breaking down that challenge?
Okay. Thank you again for your very nice question. The most challenging issue Vietnam is facing is significant shortage of power supply in few years to come. That is why Vietnamese government is concentrating on the development of coal-fired plant. I mean the coal power development, and it has caused a big debate and a big conflict between the national government, I mean central government, and the civil society, and even the local government also show their strong objection against the coal power development from the central government. So we are the go-between, and we are thinking how to solve this problem, with big conflicts between government and civil society. We are now carrying out so many programs and campaigns regarding energy efficiency and renewable energy development. Some programs included such as the 1,000 million buildings. We develop and we promote energy efficiency, the shock separation of solid waste, the recirculation of wastewater, and especially the development of rooftop solar PV deployment. Another program is the OBCC, the One Planet City Challenge, that engage cities in Vietnam into making CO2 inventory at the city level. And we follow up with a long-term program on the mitigation and adaptation to climate change at the city level. So we still have so many programs and campaigns ahead, and we do hope these efforts will help Vietnam to ensure our NDC to the international community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chiba, what do you see is the main challenge in increasing ambition in Japan, and what role can the Japan Climate Initiative play?
Okay, the JCI launched in July last year and has developed significantly over the past year to become the largest network of Japanese non-state actors addressing climate change. Starting with 105 members, JCI has grown by over 300% to 435 members with 309 companies, 31 local governments, and 95 other organizations as of today. The total population, power consumption, and greenhouse gas emissions of JCI members accounts for around 1/3 of the whole of Japan. Various non-state actors have participated in JCI, such as SPT companies, ROE 100 committed companies, universities, consumer groups, SMEs, religious groups, and municipalities, including large cities aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050. As JCI's main activities of the first year, we participated in COP24 as a member of the delegation of Japan, together with business and labor groups, and held a side event. We delivered a statement to the world in response to the Japanese government's draft long-term strategy on last May. Further, we have also conducted many meetings to exchange future direction and challenges with each other. Not only the big conference, but also the small meetings. It was great chance for us, for city government, to feel the real passion that proactive companies and non-state actors. Thank you.
This is a big question to answer in a minute, but how do you think that the Argentinian alliance, Mr. Feldkamp, can encourage the national government to enhance its NDC?
Well, we are in the middle of a transition now in the government, and I think the first step that we have to do to work with the government is to show them that we are ready to raise the ambition. I mean, we, the private sector and the subnational governments, we represent about 30% of the GDP of Argentina and about 25% of population. Very important regions as the province of Santa Fe and the city of Buenos Aires are included in and more than 200 municipalities, 2,000 farmers. We represent a very important part of the economy and the society of Argentina. So I think that to say that we are ready to raise the ambition is extremely important in order to start the dialogue with the new government. What we are planning with our alliance is to first to get close to all the areas which are involved, agricultural sector, of course, the energy and environment ministry. There is a very good opportunity because a couple of weeks ago a new law was passed which is called climate change law that creates a kind of expanded cabinet or as a kind of advisory council with stakeholders of the civil society, private sector, and we will integrate, hopefully, let's see how it works, this cabinet with the government in order to provide advice and our view, and especially to tell the government that they shouldn't be so shy to raise the ambition, because we are doing already. We have different works that we are doing together with Fundación Vida Silvestre, WWF, in order to provide data to these policies, hard data to these policies in order to raise the ambition. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, if we can come back to South Africa. In 1 minute, how can the South African ACA make a difference?
Yeah, I need to start by emphasizing that Vodacom is a member of the Alliances for Climate Change in South Africa. And it is through this alliance that the company is committed to addressing climate change challenges. Now, I need to mention something phenomenal that happened last year. Because of our high reliance on coal and because of our high unemployment rate, the government of South Africa last year held a job summit. And one of the things that came out of the job summit was the establishment of the Presidential Commission on Climate Change. The conversations there were about job creation in the renewable energy sector and job losses, not only in the coal sector, but in all of the sectors of the economy that are vulnerable to climate change. So coalitions are very important. All the players were in that job summit, and all the players are part of this presidential commission. Vodacom, for instance, has committed to reduce its its carbon emissions by 50% by 2025, and we have also committed to ensure that we adopt renewable energies by 2025, and here I mean 100% adoption. But I need to say something about the importance of coalition. No one player can be able to address the challenges of the world. And what is important in each partnership is that each partner brings their own area of strength. Government, as the policy maker, must lead the way and provide policy direction and ensure that they provide a conducive environment for us as big business to be able to invest in renewable energies, technological innovations, and job creation. And civil society must always serve as the ear and the eye, because they have to hold government and private sector accountable and ensure that we walk the straight and narrow. And it is for this reason that as Vodacom, we value the partnership that we have with civil society and government and the work that we do through the alliance.
Thank you very much to all the panelists for your incredible contributions, and just to hear all those things. Collaboration really is critical, so thank you for ending us with that note. Okay, back to Andrea.
Okay, thank you very much. We're running a little bit late, so we're going to just jump ahead, and thank you all for telling us about the progress, amazing progress you've made. So for our final session, we're going to have a conversation between two wonderful climate leaders who are joining us here today. Jonathan Pershing, Program Director of Environment from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, and Manuel Pulgar Vidal, Global Leader, Climate and Energy Practice, WWF International. Welcome to the stage.
Okay, so let's continue because we just have 10 minutes. And let's do this, Jonathan, as a conversation, also as a conversation to benefit all the audience. So let me start by saying that it is amazing what all these Alliance for Climate Actions are working on. We have heard different things that has been developed by the alliances. Things related to bringing more close the people, or things more specific on how much we can exploit the potential of working with subnational governments, and all those kind of different initiatives. And it is interesting because it is clear that the Alliance for Climate Action can respond directly to the needs of every place. That's the idea of an Alliance for Climate Action, because the world, it is not the same in the different corners, in the different countries, or in the different cities or regions. So the idea of an alliance, it is to really define clearly based on need what they can do. And probably I have a question for you, Jonathan. If we start based on what it is a reality, we are facing a planetary emergency. We are in an emergency, that everybody agreed on that. How can we address that emergency by working with people on the ground, or by working with decision makers on the field, with the subnational, So what is that role, Jonathan, that you think this alliance could play in a time of emergency?
So thanks very much, Manuel. It's a pleasure to be here and to see all of you at this particular event. I'm struck at the moment by this split between our understanding of the urgency of the problem and the lack of action in many of the halls around this room. There's not much of a question about what we have to do. What there really is a lack of immediate sense of movement. To a certain extent, that's a different conversation than what just happened here at the panel that we just heard, where there were a set of very specific and very discrete things that were being done. And if we step back and think about what the agenda is, so national governments set goals, they set targets. They then put in place a series of national programs to try to implement them. But the reality is that the vast majority of those are undertaken at a much more local level. They're passed on to states and to cities that have the obligation, the capacity, and the knowledge to implement. And that means everything from farm communities who think about the local constraints and circumstance of the soil and the dynamics of their local markets, to urban communities who control the source of building permits and the structure for local transport requirements, to the discussions around trade policy, which often affect companies at an individual level as they look at global connectivity. So how do they get together? How do they think about the linkages that might make them more effective? They work in alliances. They work to exchange information. It's not straightforward because for almost every one of those circumstances, you've got capacity constraints. You've got a limited number of people who are not already actively involved with their day job in taking on the job and the portfolio of making food or producing clear goods and services or maintaining transit infrastructure. They don't have a lot of time if you're in Tokyo to connect to Los Angeles, or if you're in Jalisco to connect back to Guadalajara even, much less to go to central Peru. These kinds of relationships are what take us. We as a connecting community can bring that together. So look, Manuel, at your own experience and what you've done in terms of where you've been. You've had a number of portfolios. You've been in this role of being an advocate and an activist on the ground. You've been in the role of being a minister at a national level. You contributed to our conversation at the global framework. And you're now in a role of bringing the people together. And I'd be interested also from your perspective how you see those three roles.
He's sending back to me some questions, but it is good. No, for sure, it is clear. And let me answer your question based in some key element that you have just shared. It is true. We know that we are in an urgency time, but there is lack of action. And that's completely true. And look, friends, to implement, it is not just to develop a plan. For sure, we do need to have plans. It is good to have NDCs. It is good to push the world toward and enhance those NDCs. But to implement, it is not to write a plan. It is to develop concrete action based on that plan. And that is what we are suffering lack of, the lack of that concrete action. I used to be Minister of the Environment, and in some way the current NDCs were prepared by the Ministry of the Environment, and that is now not enough. We do need to have more actors planning and executing and implementing, and that is the idea of this action agenda. But also you have mentioned, Jonathan, one second main idea. If the alliance has the potential to do and to work on that, on the other hand, it is true that we are going to have some constraints. So the idea, and that is what we are working on, and I am advocating a lot, it is that based on that capacity, let's evaluate what can we do. Because probably we can just do some specific things, but be strategic. Try to move the needle. Try to do things that could help, don't duplicate, don't overlap with others. It is like, again, in an emergency, what we do need? SWAT teams, emergency teams. And the idea of an emergency team, it is not to duplicate. We don't need firefighters if we have already had firefighters. And probably we need doctors, or probably we do need some other element. So the idea of the Alliance of Climate Action is that can cover those gaps based on their own constraints. That is a key element when we think about that. And develop your own capacity. So my message, and I think that we agree, Jonathan, it is that, again, the Alliance, it is just the tool. But the specific content of what the Alliance can do based on their own reality, it is the main challenge. It is a key element. And let's think just US, and we are still in Alliance. It has covered, and it is covering, some political complexity based on an announcement that was developed some years ago. The Alliance grew with the idea of keeping the action agenda in the US. But it is different in Argentina. It is more related to farmers. And it is going to be different in Jalisco, that it is more to engage people into a collective action and response.
I would only pick maybe one more additional point for us to consider on the table. At the moment, we're actually facing a political problem, not a technical challenge. We actually know how to reduce emissions. We know how to do it in virtually every single sector in which we operate. We understand it for transport. We understand it for power. We understand it for industrial activities. We are quite clear what the model is for deforestation and for agricultural practice, but we're not doing it. That's a political problem. And that, to me, is a thing that's maybe best solved not at the national level, where you end up with a singular structure that has to apply across all sectors and all parts of a country, but at a local level. It's getting people engaged. It's moving to the point where citizens stand up and at a local level say that they believe in something, that they intend to act on that thing, and then they do it. And they do it by pressing their leadership to move forward, and they do it by supporting their leadership as they move forward. And this, to me, is one of the strongest domains and capacities of an alliance like this, because it means you're getting support from your peers. It means that you're not standing and saying, I'm by myself, please come. It means that you're standing in a row, shoulder to shoulder and arm in arm with your colleagues who are working on the same agenda, and you are looking for ways to take advantage of their collective learning so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This, to me, in conjunction with the exchange of information, this political frame is maybe one of the most powerful components of what we've got. And in my mind, this alliance of alliances, this umbrella structure, gives us an enormous potential to move forward. In my mind, if we could move and bring this coalition next door, it wouldn't take us quite so long. Think about how quickly we've generated this level of commitment and this level of action among those group of cities and states and businesses and academia. In the span of a couple of years, we've moved from 12 to 1,000. That's the kind of progress that we need to see.
Thank you, Jonathan. And let me just make the last question. We just have 1 minute. So it is clear that the Alliance has the potential to help to face the emergency in the sense of urgency, to help in the implementation, to be a tool to exchange information. What it is key, you have mentioned that element twice, because it is really, really important, to unlock political will. But there is one last that you have in some way, you have already mentioned, to listen and to connect with the demand of the people on the streets. Because there are people on the streets. There are people sending a clear message. And we have to be smart in responding that message. It is not that it is, now it is the opposition, it is the other party. That is the most silly way to address those kind of demonstrations on the street. The people is saying to us something. How much the Alliance can link fit with that message of the people on the streets?
So I would only pick one last point here. In very, very interesting ways, the Alliance does represent the people in a much more immediate fashion than many of our national leaders do. They're a little more removed. When I served as the national level in government in the United States, you're somewhat removed. You sit in a city government, and the people come to talk to you about the problems with the trash removal and the water availability. You sit in a company, and your customers are directly responding to how you perform. You are in a local environment, in a farm community, and if your food isn't delivered, and if the farming practices don't work in the context of new changing climate, you don't eat. These are much more immediate ways to engage. And if I look at everyone from the Fridays to the Future, to the Yellow Vests conversation in France, to the protests on the streets in the United States, these are people who have to respond immediately. This alliance is much more tied in to that visceral and immediate and near-term obligation to act. And in my mind, it represents a real pathway to the future.
Thank you, Jonathan. It is always a pleasure to talk with Jonathan. Let me finish with this idea that I mentioned in the last summit in New York. The Alliance for Climate Action, it is as a 5-point start, because it is a mechanism to keep vision, that it is important to keep that vision, to know what are we expecting to be in 2050 and in 2030 and what to do in 2020. Also, it is a good way to keep action, a specific and concrete action. It is a way to connect with people, to connect with local actors, that it is a third important element. Also, a way to exchange information and to transmit messages, clear messages and simple messages to the people on the street, and finally to have innovative and accurate response to the crisis. So that 5 points star are, in my point of view, what it is the main potential of the Alliance for Climate Action. So thank you very much for this time. Thank you again, Jonathan, a pleasure, and see you later.
Just to close out, thank you again, Jonathan and Manuel, for reminding us of the power of the alliances to accelerate action on the ground, to address the lack of political leadership that we have, and to connect with the public. Sorry. Okay. Ooh, apologies. So, thank you, Jonathan and Manuel. We've had really amazing presentation today on the alliances. There's been really fantastic progress. So please follow the alliances on Twitter to stay tuned with the updates. I'd like to thank the fantastic panelists today for their powerful words, and thank again the Stanley Center, the U.S. Climate Action Center, and WWF for hosting this fantastic event. Thank you. Sign-up sheet.
Whoever has the sign-up sheet from this event, can you bring it up, please?
Hello, everybody. We ask you for your empathy and your collaboration. We need to move this event out so that the other event can start as quickly as possible. So please, if you can exit and allow other colleagues to come in. And if you're sitting, it's because I'm assuming that you want to be in the next event, in which case just stay. But for those who are not, please leave now, and thank you. Thank you.